David R. here. Today I'm going to talk to you about this book, Fight Club, by Chuck Palahniuk. This book is about a narrator. We don't get to ever know his name. He is bored with his life of luxury. He has a nice condo, all the trappings of modern life. He has a good job as a recall campaign coordinator for the auto industry. You know, he's living a good life, but he's bored. And this life of comfort causes what's called ennui, which means extreme boredom. So this boredom causes insomnia. And the insomnia is so bad that he goes to see his doctor. His doctor says to chew on some valerian root and get more exercise. I used to take valerian root in excess. And I don't know. I don't think it did much for me. I used to have these problems too, this insomnia thing. And didn't really do much. So I agree with the author here. He's like, just give me a sleep aid. That's really what he wants. But the doctor won't give it to him. And the doctor says, nobody's ever died from lack of sleep. But the doctor does say, he says, if you want to see real pain, swing by the Eucharist. See the brain parasites. See the degenerative bone diseases. See the organic brain dysfunctions. See cancer patients getting by. And so the narrator does go to a group. He goes to a testicular cancer group. I mean, he goes to all kinds of them. But I just want to focus on this one in particular. He goes to this group. And he meets Big Bob. Big Bob was a former bodybuilder who had taken a lot of steroids, and throughout the years it messed up his body. Big Bob had some giant man boobs. They're huge. And so his life was really bad, worse than the narrator's. So the narrator cries in Big Bob's arms. He cries. And this crying helps him sleep. It cures his insomnia. You know, he got all these emotions out. So he's fine as long as he cries. But Marla Singer shows up. She comes to the groups. And she's a faker just like the narrator. Obviously, she doesn't have testicular cancer. But she shows up and she smokes in these groups. It's crazy. So she knows he's a faker. He knows she's a faker. This prevents him from crying. And in return, his insomnia comes back. He says this, 3 weeks without sleep and everything becomes an out-of-body experience. Everything is so far a copy of a copy of a copy. I agree. I used to be there. I know what it's like. Also, the narrator and Marla get into a very heated relationship. But the narrator doesn't know this until later. I know, it's kind of odd, right? But he doesn't find out until later in the story. Now, on vacation, the narrator meets Tyler Durden. That in the book, he meets Tyler on the beach. But in the movie, if you ever saw the movie, he meets Tyler on an airplane. And Tyler was talking to him about soap. But in the book, he meets Tyler on a nude beach. And Tyler gives him his number and that sort of thing. And so once the narrator returns home from this vacation, he finds that his apartment has been blown up. Yeah, all of his nice, trendy things are out on the street in pieces or totally destroyed. He has nothing anymore. He says he was a slave to his nesting instinct, which is true. He says, you're trapped in your lovely nest, and the things you used to own, now they own you. May I never be complete. May I never be content. May I never be perfect. It's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. That's true. It's true in many walks of life. Like a person who doesn't value their own life, they're the most dangerous because they have nothing to lose. So after this tragedy that happened, he calls Tyler, and they meet at a bar, and they talk. And after some drinks, the narrator has told Tyler that he's got no place to go, and Tyler says, you can stay with me, but you got to do one thing. When they step outside, he's like, you got to hit me as hard as you can. And right here, this is where Fight Club was born. So here's the rules. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. The third rule of Fight Club, when someone says stop or goes limp, even if he's just faking it, the fight is over. Now there are other rules here. 2 guys to a fight, 1 fight at a time. They fight without shoes or shirt. The fights go on as long as they have to. And the 7th rule of Fight Club, if this is your first night at Fight Club, you have to fight. That's how Fight Club was born. Just Tyler and the narrator fighting outside of a bar. Now, Tyler works night jobs. He is a projectionist and a waiter. As a projectionist, he inserts pornographic pictures into mainstream movies. Just little like snaps of these images. He also pees in soup that is being served to the rich. And obviously he's committing civil disobedience already. But this grows. He takes his Fight Club members and recruits them to what's called Project Mayhem. And in Project Mayhem, they basically terrorize the city by doing various things, like one was on top of a used car lot on top of the building. They're feeding pigeons, and then then the pigeons crap on the cars, the new cars, used cars, whatever, but they crap on the cars. That's just one thing, but they do a lot more. That's just an example. Now, when Tyler disappears, the narrator goes and looks for him because he's lost without Tyler. He's nobody without him. And it's not until he enters a bar in Seattle that a man calls him Mr. Durden. Now, everywhere else he was going, people were calling him Sir, and he didn't know why. But this guy called him Mr. Durden. Now the narrator is aware that he is Tyler Durden, but he's not 100% sure about this. So he calls Marla and asks them if they ever had sex. And he also asks Marla what his name is, and she says Tyler Durden. So now we see the narrator is Tyler. So throughout the book, the author leaves clues, such as, I know this because Tyler knows this. Or he says, if you could wake up in a different place at a different time, could I wake up as a different person? These are just a few clues, but in every single chapter, the author is leaving clues constantly. All right, so after the narrator, or Tyler, kills his boss and another man, he wants to end Project Mayhem. And he also wants to end Fight Club. So his conscience is taken over here. The way I see it, Tyler is his alpha side, and the narrator is the beta side. Or Tyler has no conscience, and the narrator has a conscience. So he shows up at a fight club, wants to fight everybody. But after about the second or third fight, he is too damaged to go on. So he loses that one there. And then he tries to stop Project Mayhem. And they catch him in a bus. They're going to cut off his testicles. And he even asks the cops to help him. But the cops are in on this too. They're part of Project Mayhem. They endorse this behavior. And so, he faints before his balls get cut off. And then he wakes up and finds that they were not cut off. He says, now also, the book is full of lots of flashbacks. So chapter 29 is a continuation of chapter 1, where the narrator and Tyler are on top of the Parker Morris building with a gun to the narrator's mouth. And he says, to God, this looks like one man alone holding a gun in his own mouth. So you see, there is no, well, you could say there is no Tyler, but you could say there is because the narrator is Tyler. But he's holding a gun to his own mouth. And after he pulls the trigger, he's in a mental hospital, which he describes as heaven. And he says, in heaven, people write to him. And they tell him that he's remembered, that he's a hero, that they miss him. And he mentions that the bullet of Tyler's gun tore out of his other cheek. So he's really deformed. He's all messed up. And at the mental hospital, he sees a man or several men with damaged faces. They say, we look forward to getting back to the way things were before. Tyler's not dead. Tyler's still around, and Fight Club is still around. So, all right. But I want to talk about a couple things. Two themes that I believe are in this story that go throughout the story. One is anti-consumerism. That is a constant theme. Like his apartment was filled with all of these things, and those things owned him. He was a slave to his things. Like he said, he was a slave to his nesting instinct. And people who used to sit in their bathroom looking at pornography, now they look at the IKEA furniture catalog. And he even, describes in detail each and every thing in his apartment, which are ridiculous junk stuff, in my opinion. And Fight Club is basically a rebellion against consumerism. That's what Project Mayhem is. Destroying consumerism. Tearing it down. And the second theme is the crisis of masculinity. Now, this crisis is being overcome by Fight Club, where men are using extreme violence to get their rage out, to express their masculine side, because this was written in the 90s. So it was a very comfortable time, I think. And so these guys were comfortable. They had nothing to fight for unless you're fighting in Iraq or something. They had nothing to strive for. There was no Great Depression. The author says there's a Great Depression of the soul, of the spirit, not really a challenge. And so these men, they create Fight Club. Because in the author's words, we're a generation of men raised by women. And I'm wondering if another woman is really the answer we need. So that's why they have this men's club, Fight Club. It's a men's only club. You could look at things like the divorce rates are extremely high. Now, even worse than it was in the 90s when this book was written. The education system views masculinity as toxic. So does the media. The boys are basically drugged for being boys in school. Boys are encouraged to act more like girls. You have this trans thing going on, little boys dressing like girls, and it's just wrong. It's child abuse. It's basically dehumanizing boys. A boy can't be a girl. It just can't. So there's also, traditional masculinity is also viewed as toxic, or white supremacy even. They'll say that. Single motherhood is pedestalized, and fathers are demonized. So Fight Club addresses these issues. And that, like I said, is by extreme violence. But what else do they have? Nowadays, we are facing challenges. And I think a lot of men are going to have to become men again and not boys to fight a system that is disenfranchising them, myself included. So I suggest that you watch the film, read the book. This is like revolutionary at the time, at least. I don't know about today as much, but it really had an impact on me and an impact on a lot of guys. Well, anyway, that's all I got. Talk to you later. Bye.